This is Kate Stalker interviewing Thomas Solheim of Madison. Hi, Tom. Why do you want to share your story?
The thing that comes to my mind first is because I like the idea of this project, and it only works if people are willing to. And if I tell people that I did it, maybe they'll consider doing it.
Well, thank you for that. So where were you born?
I was born in a little town 30 miles north of here, Poynette, Wisconsin.
And then your family moved to Monona?
Not directly. We lived in Arlington till I was about 4 or 5, and then made a trip to Illinois for 3 or 4 years. My dad worked for the canning company, and that was his job in Arlington, and then moved to Mendota and decided he wanted to do something different. And he found an opportunity to go into the insurance business in Madison, and he and Mom decided they were going to move the family to Madison, and they did a search for a house and found a house that they could buy in Monona, and that's how we ended there.
Oh, so it was accidental.
In a way, the Monona wasn't the intention, but Madison was,
Mm-hmm.
and Monona was the attractive place for them to settle down.
Great. Did your mother also work, or was she a homemaker?
She didn't work for a while because I had 3 sisters, and one wasn't even born till we got here, and she didn't work till after Chris went to school.
Uh-huh. So what are some influential childhood memories of your family? What kinds of things did you do together?
The things I remember most are family trips and family gatherings. And the gatherings would have been at our house in Monona, at our house in Mendota before that, but maybe mostly at my mom's parents' house in Arlington, and very regular visits there, even when we were in Mendota. And I think the desire to be back closer to them really was part of the reason for moving this direction. And so family visits to Arlington and to Lake Wisconsin, where her dad had built a very modest little cottage in the year I was born, 1947.
Wow. So do you have any other formative personal experiences?
Well, sure, a lot of them. And, I think school, of course, and, high school at Monona Grove High School was a very important formative identity creating event. But before that, school in Mendota and grade school in Madison. My sisters and I went to a parochial school in Madison and not the Monona grade schools.
Even when you lived here?
Yes.
Oh. So what personal hobbies do you have now?
My personal hobbies are motorcycle riding and maintenance, reading of all kinds. My main sport is curling.
Oh.
And do I have other hobbies besides that? I'm socializing, I guess, but that's not really a hobby.
Oh, it can be. Tell me more about curling.
I became a member of the Madison Curling Club when, maybe 30 years ago, and probably more like 40. And it was a heritage in our family, many of my relatives have curled in the past because of the Columbia County background, and that's a curling hotbed. Although none of my family were active curlers when I started in 1982, and a friend at work invited me to try it. So,
and you still do it?
I do.
What about it do you enjoy?
The social aspects of it are great. The other members of the club are highly varied and interesting and social group. My two sons both got very interested in curling, and one has gone beyond me in skill and commitment to the sport. The sport it's a great game. It's a game that
It's an Olympic sport.
it is, and our club here in Madison has members of the Olympic team that we have the privilege of curling with on a regular and not exceptional basis.
That must be exciting.
It is.
Do you have a favorite memory of curling?
Right now, my favorite memory is the national championship events this spring, where my son's team did very well, but ultimately lost in the finals. But I have memories of going to the curling club and watching my grandfather curl when I was in second or third grade, and it's all a long-term part of the foundation of my development.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So tell me about your family. You have sons.
I have two sons and a daughter, and a wife of now 49 years.
Wow, congratulations. And what other things do you enjoy doing together?
We travel. We do projects in our yard and our house, and the family traveling and get-togethers are, kind of a historical connection to our past. Last weekend we had one of the great ones, a extended family trip to Bayfield for a wedding there, and my kids and their families and we all stayed in a big house, and we had a grand time and a grand celebration at the wedding. But that's maybe the kind of regular event that are most important in our family, is having a way to do that, gather at somebody's house or go on a trip together.
Yeah, so the tradition continues.
Yes.
Yes, so your parents moved to Monona a long time ago. Do you have any stories to tell about their experiences or what was happening in history at the time they came here?
Well, sure. It was a big change in their life, and so my dad entered a completely new field of work, and it was much more, I think, kind of professional. And his prior work had been more office background work, and he was out with people all the time and interacting on a high level. At the same time, they were becoming part of a larger city and community for the first time in both of their lives, and starting over and building a new community of people around them. And I think Monona was really important to that process. The community of young families they found in Monona in 1956, particularly at the Monona Lutheran Church, was remarkable, and they formed such strong bonds with maybe 15 other families, and those families were part of our lives, and some still are, even though my folks are gone now. Children of their generation in other families, and their children are acquainted with my children, and
That's wonderful.
yeah, it is, and it's just that group that shared the experience of starting a church from scratch and running it and raising their families together. They're all about the same age, and it just was a huge bond for them.
That's great.
Yeah.
So tell me about your childhood here in this new community with all these new friends. What kinds of things did you do?
I think of the lake as being a huge part of it. I remember taking swimming lessons at Schluter Beach when I was in 4th grade. I think I was probably a swimmer by then, but maybe my sisters weren't, and my mom found it convenient to send us all to Schluter Beach in the summer. And of course, in those days, it was she didn't have to go. We could make our way down to Schluter Beach if somebody was as old as a 4th grader to help with that. And there were lifeguards and instructors there, and the kids were in safe hands. So I remember that, and friends who were fortunate enough to live on the lake always were a big part of my life, and being able to enjoy swimming and boating and put a raft in the lake with them. Some of my best friends were the Reeks, who lived right next to the spring on just past where Winnequa comes off Monona Drive. There's a valley there, and there was a historic spring and a structure in that little valley right by the lake, and they lived right next door to that. And we spent a lot of time in the lake there. Ultimately, I had a strong desire for a boat, and I got some gifts of money when I was confirmed in our church, and I had enough money to find an old used Thompson wood and canvas canoe.
Wow.
And to have that for myself the summer after I was in 8th grade was a huge gift, and I was able to take my canoe to the lake and paddle and go up and down the Monona shore and visit friends who lived there. And so that whole lake experience was a big deal, and that continued in our family when my sister moved back to Monona in about maybe 1985, and they ended up living on Belle Isle on the Shishin Trail, and they raised their kids in a house there on the lake, and of course we all continued to enjoy that aspect of Monona.
Yeah, do you still enjoy the water?
Yeah. I live in Madison now, and we live on the lake, and that was one of our primary reasons for returning to Madison after my college and military service. My wife and I, and after law school, we considered moving to Milwaukee or Chicago or New York, and ultimately the commitment we made was, well, we're going to find a house on the lake and get it in any way we possibly can, and stay in Madison.
Great.
And that's,
So how do you think your children's childhood differed from yours, or was it really similar?
in the lake aspects, it was similar. They went to much bigger urban type school than I did. Even though my school was in Madison, it was tiny and parochial in every sense. And they went to Madison public schools and big ones, including East High. So that was different. But my my parents were a huge part of their lives, just like my grandparents were a big part of mine. And I think my folks spent more time with the kids many weeks than we did. And Mom would pick up the kids after school, or Carla especially. And so I think their lives were pretty much the same.
Good, that's great.
Yeah.
You mentioned military service.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that? When were you
Sure.
in the military?
Sure. I was in when I graduated from college in 1969. It was clear that I was going to be in the service. The Madison Draft Board made exceptions for nothing, and after you've graduated from college, that was it. In those days, so I decided I wasn't prepared to be a conscientious objector, but I was not prepared to participate in the war that was going on at that point. So I found a way to become part of the U.S. Coast Guard, and that killed two birds with one stone. I was also very interested in seeing Antarctica, and I knew that the United States Coast Guard ran the U.S. fleet of icebreakers, and including in polar duty. So I thought I would have a good chance of doing that. I thought there probably weren't a lot of people in the Coast Guard that were dying to go to Antarctica, but I was. And so that worked out. I went to initial training and got assigned to a polar icebreaker, and went to Antarctica and the northern polar regions, and we had several deployments, and it was a great experience, although I whined about it, and like every sailor does at the time, about being away, and
Sure.
so.
But you were away in a fairly safe place at
Yeah,
the time.
yeah.
Well, do you remember your draft number?
There, it wasn't lottery when I was first exposed to the draft, and so I was drafted. It was after I had already enlisted in the Coast Guard. Everybody was drafted in 1969.
So do you have any scary moments on that ship?
As I look back on it, it doesn't seem like it was that scary. We went through some terrible storms with some serious damage to the ship, and we were in very deep and difficult ice trying to get out. We'd get stuck for short periods of time, but we always figured we'd be able to get out. So I really don't remember anything real scary. I remember it being hard to sleep sometimes in storms, but that's...
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So did anything that happened in that time help make you become the person you are today?
Without a question. One thing for sure is I was assigned to engineering duty, and I had no prior experience with handling engines and boilers and motors and generators and pumps, and I had to learn all of that stuff. So that's been a big part of my interest in motorcycles, and I've had cars that I've worked on over the years.
So you learned a good, valuable
Yeah.
skill.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned being an attorney. When you came back from the military, you went back to school?
I did. Yeah, and I think it was a lot of things. One of it was curiosity and wanting to understand better the basis of law and government. Part of it was a certain amount of maybe dissatisfaction with government power over me in the form of the draft, and I wanted to understand what the limits of individual liberty were and what the tools of exercising that were. And it also seemed like it offered a lot of flexibility in terms of your future, and working for academic institution or being a private practitioner, working for many businesses or people or whatever, or working for government. Mm-hmm. So that's what went through my mind.
Mm-hmm. And what type of law did you choose?
I chose business law, and I have represented hundreds of businesses over the years, gravitating towards a concentration representing large and complex nonprofits and in healthcare and related to universities and being involved in general in kind of a academic, charitable kind of enterprise.
Great. If you had it to do over again, would you choose the same thing?
I don't know. Maybe. I'm never quite sure. I shouldn't have gone back into physics. I studied physics when I was an undergraduate. Or maybe if I would have tried engineering, I would have liked that better than anything. But it was all great. I don't have any regrets, but I wonder sometimes.
I think everyone does.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, do you still have any friends in Monona that you grew up with who still live here?
I have many friends in Monona. I am not close to anyone that I grew up with, but I see a few of them every once in a while. And Dan Coleman is one of my good friends who I have seen regularly over the years. And Dick Femrate is another one. And they were high school classmates, and they are wonderful people. And one of the things that I'm excited about this week is the Monona Festival. And that's always a chance to go back to the beer tent, and you're likely to run into people that you remember from those days.
So you go every year to the festival?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great commitment.
No, it's a great love of beer.
So a couple of more difficult questions here. In any area of your life, of what accomplishments are you most proud?
Well, it's not an accomplishment, but I'm proud of my children. And I think that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of, that they are such wonderful people, and I wasn't able to screw things up too bad. The other accomplishments are, I guess, helping a lot of organizations do some good things, including the University of Wisconsin, and helping my church solve some problems. But I think those are probably the things that I think of.
Okay. So, what is the one thing you most want people to remember about you in years to come? Or to think of you?
I think that my relationship with other people, I want them to think that it was positive and enriched their lives as much as it enriched mine. And
Great. Do you have any other stories you'd like to share?
what I thought of when I was thinking about this interview that I think is characteristic of Monona in the days when I was a young bicycle rider in late grade school or early high school was when they instituted the Monona Bike Patrol. And it was a village-sanctioned quasi-police force. And it was peers of mine who were on the bike patrol. And I don't remember any names, but I remember a certain amount of officiousness. And I think the creation of the bike patrol was well-meaning, but the idea of putting some kind of power in the hands of 12 and 13-year-olds without considering the training and ramifications, that might not have been thought through as well as it should have. And on the other hand, maybe I'm just being a pill and resentful of people doing the right thing and doing their duty. And but I do remember going down Owen Road or Midmore or something like that in that neighborhood and having somebody I know demand that I stop and on my bicycle so they could write a ticket. And I don't remember what it was for, but it didn't seem like it made sense to me at the time.
Oh,
And
right.
so that's a piece of Monona lore that I'll bet people don't talk about too much anymore. The
I don't think
bicycle.
it exists.
Yeah,
Oh, that's wonderful.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Thomas,
You're
for
welcome.
coming in today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do it and interview me.
Thank you.